There's a new PS5 update now, but you might want to wait before installing it. Is Sony abandoning single-player games? We are going to go through all the updates that come with today's PS5 update, but in the future, we're getting an even better one. It was actually confirmed by Sony, no longer a rumor. And there's two big games releasing tomorrow, but which one should you pick? Let's find out in today's episode of PlayStation News. Alright, so with this whole thing of Sony buying Bungie, this New Haven studio, both of these studios are multiplayer-centric online studios. There's also that announcement that they're making 10 live service games in the near future. People are kind of worried that Sony might give up on their bread and butter, which is single-player, open-world, third-person action games with really good combat. I'm not going to bury the lead here because Hermen Hulst just did an interview and said, nope, that is never going to happen. They just want to make more games. He said, we want the team to be fiercely autonomous from a creative perspective. I know from experience that that leads to the best possible games. We want the culture that Jade Raymond has nurtured, which is all about creating really positive and really fun connections between people. We want them to carry on doing that. We are here to help, and we have created a healthy organization to enable that. This acquisition shouldn't take anything away, quite the opposite. What we are taking away are distractions so that they can optimize that creative independence. That's what we're here to do. Like most likely The Last of Us Part 3 at Naughty Dog and Ghost of Tsushima 2 over at Sucker Punch. It would really suck if those games got pushed further down the road because these studios had to come in and support Haven Studios or Bungie. They're getting studios that are already built up to make multiplayer games, and they're having them work on multiplayer games, and they're taking studios they already own that work on single player games and let them work on single player games. It's kind of like the perfect scenario, and we've seen the bad side of this over at Microsoft with the initiative lately. They started up this studio, and basically because it had no focus, they were just kind of throwing stuff at the wall. Most of the creative team has left that studio, and now Crystal Dynamics is kind of running that game. It just shows a lack of focus there, whereas Sony is like, no, we're letting our multiplayer studios make multiplayer games, single player studios make single player games. Dead simple, that's how we're gonna have it. I was really more excited for this live service future that Sony is working towards before I saw what's going on with Gran Turismo 7. Sony's generally been pretty good about not having a ton of microtransactions in their games. If you look at their biggest games like Ghost of Tsushima, like Horizon Zero Dawn, they really just come out with a big expansion pretty much a year after the game releases. It's meaty content, and they generally speaking don't overcharge for it. I know people are still mad about how much Ghost of Tsushima's PS5 update technically costs because they really forced you into buying that $30 expansion. I didn't like how that worked out, but the content itself in that expansion was pretty good. And when you look at the multiplayer mode of Ghost of Tsushima, which you could argue is pretty much a live service game, all of the extra stuff that they've added on to that has been free. I go back and forth on microtransactions. With Destiny 2, they do it really well. The season itself is $10. You get a ton of content, you get a ton of guns, you get a ton of armor, but then there's always the Eververse store just sitting right there with new stuff to buy. It's usually tied to events like the summer solstice and things like that. I don't love that system, but it works really well. I just hope that with it being a first party thing with Sony going forward, they can make it so that you just get season passes for games and there's a ton of content in there and all of the coolest stuff is there and you don't have to pay extra for it, because that's what really sucks. But yeah, regardless, it's good to hear that Sony is aware that people are kind of nervous they're going to move on from what they really buy PlayStation 5s for, and that's just good all around. I told him to subscribe last time. What do you mean it wasn't enough? All right, I'll tell him again. Guys, I just got off the phone with Jim Ryan. He really liked the shout out the last time he called me and I told you guys to subscribe, but unfortunately, he said it's not enough. He's with me here trying to get me to 100,000 subscribers, so it'd be really cool if you keep Jim Ryan happy by subscribing to the channel. I don't like it when he calls me. So I know we just got Dying Light 2, Horizon Forbidden West, Elden Ring, the list goes on and on, but March 25th is actually a pretty big day for PlayStation 5 releases, because we not only have Ghostwire Tokyo dropping, but we also have Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. The thing that's kind of weird with Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, on the other hand, is that this is a full price game. If you buy it on PS4, it's $60, which is kind of crazy. I'm gonna be real, I really wasn't expecting Tiny Tina's Wonderlands to be the one of these two games that was getting the best reviews. This game I thought was just gonna be a cheaper experience in the Borderlands world, where they took the assets of Borderlands 3 and made a new game and sold it at a lower price, like those games we got with Far Cry 3, 4, and 5, which were Blood Dragon, Primal, and New Dawn. But this is a full-on release. It's going to have DLC, it's got extras coming down the line. There's an edition of the game that can cost $90 on the PlayStation 5, so yeah, Gearbox is definitely treating this as a full release. So knowing that this is kind of made with Borderlands 3's assets, and it's still getting great reviews, I think this one might be worth checking out. I've watched a few reviews of this game so far, and it kind of has the same same problems that Borderlands 3 did, apparently. Like, the map isn't all that great. It's kind of hard to navigate. It doesn't actually show bridges that take you from one area to another. It gets a little grindy towards the end, and the guns kind of just look like Borderlands 3 guns with a crossbow like front. But at its core, apparently the gameplay is really cool, and they took the ideas from that standalone DLC that they gave away for free on PlayStation Plus and kind of just blew them up. I saw a part in SkillUp's review where like the main character was going up to a castle and Tiny Tina was sort of narrating it, and she's like, there's a skeleton army and there's a ship out in the water and there's like fireballs raining from the sky. And as she's talking about this stuff, it all starts happening instantly, and I wasn't expecting that level of detail from this game. And I didn't know that Andy Samberg and Will Arnett were voice acting in this. That seems like a huge improvement for Borderlands 3, which I stopped playing that game because the story was so bad. It's just awful, and the main bad guys were so irritating that I couldn't deal with it. This seems like a really good recalibration. But then on the other hand, you have Ghostwire Tokyo, which is the new game from Tango Gameworks, and the reviews are definitely not bad. They're just not up to par with what a PlayStation exclusive usually gets. Now, of course, this is a third-party exclusive that Sony just paid for, but still, it's in the low 70s on Metacritic, and the problems really seem to come down to, it gets a little repetitive by the end. So like, I think my friend Jake Baldino over at GameRanks put it best. He said, if you're into this kind of stuff, like spooky stuff, you're into this Japanese folklore type of horror, you'll probably get a lot more mileage out of it than someone who's not really into that stuff, because it's kind of a generic open world game. But I am very into horror, as you probably know if you've watched the channel before. So between these two games, I'm probably gonna go with Ghostwire Tokyo, but if it's not holding my attention, I could see myself just running over to Target and picking up Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, because it honestly looks pretty good. But yeah, you've got two pretty solid games, it seems, coming out this week. Let me know if you're gonna pick either of them up down in the comments, or are you just gonna stick with Elden Ring? Speaking of Elden Ring, I've just updated my merch store. You can find it in the merch shelf. If you have YouTube Premium, it's linked down in the description, or you can just go to staypsready.com. We have the PS Ready Doom t-shirt. I also have this Deck Ready Doom t-shirt. I have an Elden Ring inspired t-shirt that says Maidenless on it. That one's pretty awesome. And we also have the classic My Dual Senses Tingling Spider-Man design. And if you go to the site, you can use the code STAYREADY at checkout and you'll get 10% off. It's pretty cool. All right, so we talked about the new games releasing this week, so let's talk about this new PS5 update. I was honestly kind of surprised when I woke up this morning and saw on Twitter that there was a new PlayStation 5 firmware update, and it just came out of nowhere, but then I realized that this is actually the one that's been in beta for over a month now. But if you haven't heard what's in this update, there's actually some pretty cool features. The biggest feature that Sony keeps talking about is the revamped party systems. So now when you make a voice chat party, you can make it open or closed, and if it's open, any of your friends can see that it's open and they'll be able to join it. And then on top of that, they improved the UI on the game base and in trophy cards, which is cool because those were looking a little rough a year and a half after the PS5's release. And also they've added their own version of PlayStation Series, so if you have your microphone active on your controller or you're using a headset, you can say, hey PlayStation, have it open games, have it open apps, maybe even close games. I've used that before on the PlayStation 4 with the PS4 camera. I used it as like a gimmick when that camera came out, and I kind of stopped using it pretty quickly, but I know a lot of people like this feature, so if you're in the US or UK, you can activate that now. Another cool update is you can now pin stuff to the screen while you're playing games, like multitasking. You can pin trophies to see how far along you are and making progress on getting it. You can also pin video apps, so if you're watching Twitch or watching a TV show or a movie while you're playing Destiny 2 or an online game where no one's really talking to you all that much, you can pin those to the bottom screen. I like that picture-in-picture type of stuff. I'm actually probably going to use this feature. And then on the PlayStation app side, like on your phone, they're doing a cool thing, which is updating that as well to have all of these new party features to give it parity with the PS5 and PS4. I like that. Sony used to be really bad about that in the PS4 generation, so now we're getting the same updates on the PlayStation phone app as we're getting them on the PS5, so that everything's in sync. And they don't really go into it too much, but they also say they've improved remote play from a phone. Now, all of those updates are pretty good, and if you want to keep using the PlayStation Network, you actually have to download this software update, so you don't really have a choice. But the cool thing is, at the bottom of the blog post where Sony announced that this firmware update was out, they also announced that they're working on an update for the coming months that includes variable refresh rate, and they show the menu where it's going to be able to be activated in the blog post. Like Ghostwire Tokyo, for example, needs VSync built in so it doesn't have screen tearing. VRR would eliminate that if you had a TV that supported it. They say that games are going to need patches to take advantage of it, but since a lot of these games already have this feature built into the Xbox version, since it's had that feature since launch, I'd assume that porting it over to the PS5 version should just be like flipping a switch. You would think, you would hope, it'll probably be more complicated than it seems, but hopefully all of these games that already included on Xbox have it included soon on PS5. And just taking a look at that image they shared, there is another little toggle underneath the VRR toggle that says use it for unsupported games. So if a game doesn't get that patch, your PS5 can kind of override it. It kind of reminds me of the boost mode on PS4 Pro and PS5. You could just turn it on across your PS4 Pro across the board, and if a PS4 game could run better, it would with that feature. So I like that Sony's giving you this global feature to try out, just in case a game doesn't support variable refresh rate. So if you're playing PS5 on a monitor or you're using a TV with variable refresh rate, it's good to know that in the future you're going to be able to take advantage of that on your PS5. Now, unfortunately, despite the fact that this update has been in beta for a really long time, it did not come without its problems, because a lot of games on PS5 broke as soon as people were turning this update on their console, and they also weren't able to connect to the PlayStation Network. Now, this normally wouldn't be a huge issue because they take some time to work out kinks, but the two big main games that are affected by the PlayStation Network being down right now are Elden Ring and Grand Theft Auto 5. Both of these games just came out, they both have huge online player bases, and it's kind of annoying when you're trying to sign into the PlayStation Network and you can't play Elden Ring. And on top of that, a lot of people were starting up Elden Ring and it wouldn't even launch because it was giving them an error saying that it couldn't authenticate their PlayStation Plus membership, which is crazy because yeah, you need PlayStation Plus to use the multiplayer in Elden Ring, but Elden Ring is also a single player game. So you should be able to launch it in offline mode without using a PS Plus subscription. It seems like Sony has for the most part fixed that issue, but I'm still seeing reports right in front of me on Twitter that the PSN is going in and out of service. I've actually seen a lot of articles saying to wait to update, but I don't think you have to wait to update, because either way, if you want to use online services with your games, you need to update your PS5 because you won't be able to log into the PlayStation Network if you're on the old software version. So your best option is download this update, let it apply, and if your PSN isn't working, just wait it out, because Sony is usually pretty quick on getting this stuff figured out. They learned their lesson back in the day with the great PSN outage that took an entire summer to fix for the PlayStation 3, and it was so bad they had to give everyone free games that were actually good when everything came back online. Like, I got a free copy of Infamous. That was kind of cool. At the time, I wouldn't have said it was worth it, but now looking back, it was probably worth it. Now, the timing of all this really couldn't be worse because Sony is having issues with Gran Turismo 7. You know, their last patch broke the game and they had to take it offline for 24 hours, and the single player aspect of that game is like nothing. You couldn't really do anything in the game while it was offline. They're also working on these live service games, but people are like, well, you're looking at Gran Turismo 7 going offline, and now the PlayStation Network is offline when you update the firmware of the console. That obviously doesn't give people a lot of good vibes as to how Sony is going to handle this online future, but they have Bungie on their side now, and Bungie is pretty good with network stuff, so hopefully they can team up and figure this out.